So the next speaker is Marco Büchler, who will talk about historical relevance feedback detection by text reuse mining. So he's talking about texts which go back to other texts, right? So yeah, just go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. First of all, I want to say my thank you for words to present today. It's a really great pleasure for me. Both co-authors could not come today, but I think I can represent her quite well. First question that Craig Crane, who's co-author, asked in 2006, I think, what do you do with so many books in humanities? Yeah, for sure you can never read all the books. And I will come back to this question later. Another question he asked was, we do not have any native speaker for historical languages like ancient Greek and Latin. So the question is, how can we study these languages without having native speaker as we have for modern languages? These both questions are one question and one statement. I will come back during my presentation at the end. One fundamental problem we have. If you go, for example, to Google, and you type in Herodotus, you get something like 600,000 hits. For quite sure, you can never read all the links behind. And the idea of Google means flooding the user with tons of links that no one can really read at once is one thing that we cannot do in humanities. Whenever you think about humanities, I'm a computer scientist actually, whenever you think about humanities, you have to find exactly this one passage a user wants to see. If you do not show the user these one text passages he wants to see, your entire system is bad. Just as an example, if you look, there's a text of Caesar. And there's one very difficult word. It occurs only once in the entire Latin text, and it's inflected. And the first part of the word is on the end of the first of a line, and the second part of this word is on the next line. So you need to do many things in order to find this word in the base form. And if humanists do not find this word, whatever you have done, whatever it is brilliant behind, they do not accept your system. Just to have an understanding what I'm talking about. And what Google, what happens behind this, you see, for example, Wikipedia on the top of this list. What Google does is something like that. Google looks for links, links that how can we, which documents are linked, something like that. We have two nodes and a link between. You can say as well you make a directed graph from that. Since link not necessarily means that just two documents are linked, but one document links to another one. You could say, for example, I go to our eTraces webpage. That is a project that is behind that. And you can look on the links over there and say, for example, I look for the Bible index. That is a text reuse project for biblical reuse. I skipped this a bit here. So this means whenever you have a link, whenever a page links to another one, you have something like a relevance. Yeah, one person or one web page says this is relevant. So this means if, for example, 5 person or 5 websites say one page is very of our interest, then this page must be something special. Yeah, and exactly this is what is behind the Google PageRank algorithm. If you do that for the entire network, yeah, you have, for example, one big bubble. This is from Wikipedia. You have one big bubble or one big website B that covers a wide range of links. And wide range of links means, on the one hand, to have as many as possible links that link to one page, but also to have as good as qualified as possible web pages, something like C. That is a very strong site. So what is good with that? Though the ranking is not necessarily done, but what is proposed by Salton, for example, with the TF-IDF measure, this lacks, for example, for those statements like to be or not to be. This is all function words. Yeah, even this very famous proverb would not be ranked high, or at least it would be completely ignored. So the idea of using networks for ranking sounds smart, since whenever you build a link to one web page, it must be something, you give your feedback. And for humanities, as I said, especially in philosophy, you run into significant problems. But the most important question that we have to answer is, in humanities data, we do not have these link structures. Yeah, whenever you use a library like the Thesaurus Lingua Graeca or any other corpus, you do not have these links set. And the question comes up now is, for example, how can Google Books, for example, yeah? In Google, it is quite clear you can use the link structure of the web, but how does it work at Google Books? They do not have the link structure. They just make a massive OCR processing, yeah, and they do not have the link structure. So how can you find something like that? For quite sure, we do not know that, yeah, but for quite sure, something like a Google PageRank will not work there. And exactly this is our starting point. That we say, okay, text reuse is nothing new. Actually, humanists doing this job for a couple of centuries. Something like that is the output. So you have a reuse or famous statement, and then you have big collections of where does the statement occur in different works. However, this is done manually at the moment, and we want to do that automatically. Means we take big libraries or big massive digital data, such as Google Books or something different, and do text reuse. Text reuse is something like a quotation detection, but also paraphrases, allusions, and all different kinds of what can be reused in text. Understanding what humanities data means, so I have ancient Greek in mind, you understand something quite easy. If you take, for example, plagiarism, yeah, you have modern text. Modern text, however, you do not have language evolution. You do not, in many cases, you do not have a dialect and things like that. If you deal with ancient Greek, you are covering easily 2 millennia. And for sure, you have lots of language evolution, and that words are written in a different way. You have variants. In Greek, for example, you do not have a spelling reform or something like that. Yeah, of course, it's something like a community agreement, but you do not have a reform how to write a word. Yeah, at least in the early years. And having all this in mind, we came up with the 6 levels that we have several implementations, and that we can combine depending on which texts we are processing, what are the characteristics of these texts, what is the time spent, how many language evolution you have to expect, and things like that. All in all, this tool is already existent, but will be available earliest in something in the second quarter of 2013. The thing is simply, if you're just and you can have it, but it's not documented. Yeah, so we just have to write the documentation, and for this reason, it will be available in 2013. We do plan as well a couple of teaching courses that students and early career students, early career scholars can be familiar with this tool. At the moment, we can combine on the 6 levels about 1 million permutations of how to fingerprint, for example, a text. It's quite obvious that in philosophy you have to need a completely different fingerprinting techniques than in historiography, and those things are important for choosing the implementations there. And actually, we're talking about a similar problem. Whenever I introduced with the Google search having a link structure, and text reuse is actually quite similar. You have 2 documents, and you're identifying with text reuse techniques that 2 passages of document is similar. It doesn't matter if it is syntactically similar, like a real quotation or a duplicate, or even a paraphrase or an allusion. And then you can say something like that again. You can say, okay, you have something like metadata. You know, for example, that one author must quote the other author. You can make a direction as well. You can say, for example, I'm interested in Aeneas, and how does Aeneas quote Homer? Or you can say a bit more difficult. On the left-hand side, you have the Odyssey and the Iliad of Homer. And on the left-hand side, the 15 books of Athenaeus. And then you can say, what are the interrelations between these both sets of works, both from Homer and from Athenaeus? Something like that is the output, the image on the right-hand side. What I've done here is, on the x-axis, you have the book, separated by sentences or by text chunks. And here the book starts, and over here the book ends. And this we have done in this case for 12 books. And the top half represents quite early authors, means they are quoted, and the top and the bottom half are authors that quote other authors. Yeah, and what you can see, for example, does it? No, it does not work. So the third row from top, you have at the beginning a quite hotly reused chunk. This is the Timaeus of Plato. Plato lived about 5th, 4th century, and about 1,000 years later, there was a strong discussion in Athens about the topic that Plato discussed here. And exactly this is the idea behind the text reuse techniques that we want to apply for measuring relevance. So in this example, you have a quite hotly quoted passage. And this, in the fifth, you have a text from Aristotle that is strongly reused over the entire work. Yeah, more or less everything was important. In the Timaeus, you have just one cluster. And this work here from Celsius or Plutarch you could use as well. They're covering a lot of reuse, referring to existing works. And exactly these works are necessary for us to understand what does exist in the ancient Greek literature. Yeah, many of the reuses there that we have in there are also a kind of fragment. And the questions that we do ask us in comparison to the Google PageRank algorithm is, what are the users more interested in? To identify the works with a hotly passage that is quoted, or are the users more interested in works that are strongly covered over the entire work? So this could be something like one of the foundation books of any research areas that we have nowadays, something like that. And the second is, what are the humanists interested by having or focusing on what is hotly quoted, independent from or often quoted, and what is, or are they interested in something that is not hotly reused? The question is, it's not it's not an easy question, or the answer is not easy, since students, for example, are typically led to those kind of pages that are strongly discussed. Yeah, if you take, for example, reading lists from ancient Greek, yeah, students have to read, for example, particular books or passages from the Iliad. Yeah, and what we identified now is that those reading lists, we can cover those, that we find a correlation between the hotly reused passages. This is something that we have now, or that we are recently on in some early evaluations. The bigger issue is to have everything done by end of this year, and then bring it to the Perseus library. Perseus has a couple of 10,000 clicks a day, and what we are interested in is if we show the user several options by, for example, measuring the temperature or the coverage, or the users are more interested in the high score like the Aristotle or the Plato or this work, are the users more interested in something like that? And exactly here, it's a huge difference between students and professors. Yeah, students are typically led to the hotly quoted stuff, and professors, you do not have to lead to exactly those hotly quoted passages. They already read it, they're already familiar with that. So typically, they are interested in more the black one in order to identify things that someone has never seen before. And so 2 questions I asked. So what do you do with so many books? So one aspect is that you can identify in terms of cultural heritage, the reuse, and to build something similar as Google does with the PageRank algorithm. However, something like the cultural heritage of their PageRank algorithm. So it's not the thing to say that explicitly a human being says, this is a link, this is important, I refer to this, but we are doing this for the text that the native speaker have done. Or we do that for the guys who have spoken the ancient Greek language as well. And this is the second topic as well. So what is our mission? At the moment, we identifying or we are working, making this analysis on the Persis Digital Library. It's restricted to Greek at the moment, but on our way, we have a collaboration. We means Craig and me, with Bruce Robertson and Federico Porchetti, who are working in the field of OCR processing. And why is it important to us? It's quite simple. Whenever we have something like Google Books in mind, we have to understand that clean text, as in the Persis Digital Library, is not our use case. Whenever we have big national libraries in mind, we do have to deal with noisy data, with OCR errors in as well. So this means the techniques for text series detection must be much significantly more robust against those kind of errors. And our vision is that we can exactly this kind of techniques to noisy data and in order to support big national libraries to build a PageRank algorithm for big national libraries and maybe Google Books as well. And last but not least, I asked Max to present the slide. I want to advertise two things that we have in Leipzig. First of all, I want to lead you to the Humanities seminar. Deadline is end of this week. Yeah, just something like a 1,000 words abstract. Yeah, whenever you have a smart idea or you want to present, so you're very, very welcome there. And the deadline for the Innovation Award is July, end of July, and we have something like 1,000 euros for the winner who will get this award. And last but not least, in words or in terms of networks, stay connected. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have 2 minutes for questions. Let me do one comment. I think what's really great here is that one of my most brilliant teachers at universities, Hans-Peter Laubsche, said archaeology boils down to two questions. The first is, what do you really see here? So what do you see and how is it biased? And the other question is, where does this come from? And this where does this come from? To do this kind of thing with texts, right? If you go to a really brilliant library, you could spend weeks to find out what are the most read locations. And then if you go one hop away, if you have Baroque art historians wanting to find out what are the ancient sculptures, obviously they always will turn to the top popular stuff, right? So basically to make research better, which is cross-disciplinary, you actually need exactly this kind of application. And therefore this is really super, super valuable. So thank you very much. So is there questions in the audience?
Yeah, hi there. My name is Yuri Molina. I think it was really, really interesting kind of seeing all this information and a way of visualizing these links between the texts. I was wondering if you'd considered to make this also some kind of active tool where if I was reading Google Books or maybe I'm reading on my Kindle, I can actually link between the things I'm reading about. So if I'm reading Aristotle or something and it refers to another text, I can actually hop between those and kind of add this more interactive layer to these old books, adding some kind of web layer to the books, if that was ever thought about. Thank you.
So if you know Craig a bit, you know that exactly this is his interest, yeah, and for quite sure we will take this into account. Yeah.
So maybe one last question, which goes in the same hole. The corpus of books you're working on is the subset of about a couple of thousand Greek and Latin texts you got from the Google Books corpus. Is that true, or?
We are recently, in our recent experiments, yeah, though actually with the text reuse techniques we can process every language, yeah, though this does not matter. But we are focusing in the collaboration with Craig on the Persis Digital Libraries, including the text by Bruce Robertson, that's a Greek Google Books text. So this is our corpus.
Okay. Thank you very much again to the speaker.